For years, the royal family had quietly admired the world of luxury automobiles. Whenever a magnificent new vehicle appeared at a prestigious event or passed through the palace gates, it would naturally capture their attention. The elegance of the design, the craftsmanship of the interior, the smoothness of the ride, and the sense of comfort it offered all seemed to represent something more than simple transportation. It represented a dream they had carried with them for a long time. But their dream was never as simple as walking into a showroom and choosing the most expensive car available. They wanted something special, something that would suit their family, their lifestyle, and the memories they hoped to create together. They imagined long journeys through beautiful countryside roads, quiet evenings returning home from important events, and special occasions when the entire family could travel together in comfort. There were many different cars they could have chosen. Some were famous for their speed, others for their luxurious interiors, while others were known for their timeless appearance. The family spent countless hours discussing what kind of vehicle would truly feel right for them. They looked at different designs, compared interiors, considered comfort and practicality, and thought carefully about what they actually needed rather than simply choosing a car, because it carried an impressive price tag. The dream gradually became something the entire family could talk about together. It was no longer just one person's wish. Each member had their own ideas about what the perfect vehicle should look like. Some preferred a classic and elegant appearance, while others were fascinated by modern technology and advanced features. There were conversations about colors, seating arrangements, interior materials, safety features, and even the small details that most people might never notice. Yet every time the family came close to making the purchase, another responsibility seemed to appear. Important family commitments needed attention. Other priorities came first. Plans changed, circumstances became complicated, and the dream had to be placed on hold once again. At times, it probably felt as though the perfect moment would never arrive. Still, the family continued to keep the dream alive. They didn't forget about the car. Instead, they continued watching the market, learning about new models, and waiting for the right opportunity. Months could pass without any major progress, but the idea remained in the background. What made the dream particularly meaningful was the patience behind it. They could have made a quick decision at any moment, but they wanted the purchase to feel right. They wanted to look back years later and know that they had chosen carefully. The family also understood that a luxury car comes with more than a beautiful exterior. There are maintenance costs, insurance, security considerations, comfort for passengers, and the practical realities of owning such a vehicle. Every detail mattered, so the dream continued to grow slowly. One evening, the conversation about the car became more serious than usual. The family began discussing their favorite models again, looking at photographs and specifications, and imagining what it would be like to finally see their chosen vehicle waiting for them. For the first time in a long while, the dream didn't feel impossibly far away. There was a sense that for years, the royal family had quietly admired the world of luxury automobiles. Whenever a magnificent new vehicle appeared at a prestigious event or passed through the palace gates, it would naturally capture their attention. The elegance of the design, the craftsmanship of the interior, the smoothness of the ride, and the sense of comfort it offered all seemed to represent something more than simple transportation. It represented a dream they had carried with them for a long time, but their dream was never as simple as walking into a showroom and choosing the most expensive car available. They wanted something special, something that would suit their family, their lifestyle, and the memories they hoped to create together. They imagined long journeys through beautiful countryside roads, quiet evenings returning home from important events, and special occasions when the entire family could travel together in comfort. There were many different cars they could have chosen. Some were famous for their speed, others for their luxurious interiors, while others were known for their timeless appearance. The family spent countless hours discussing what kind of vehicle would truly feel right for them. They looked at different designs, compared interiors, considered comfort and practicality, and thought carefully about what they actually needed rather than simply choosing a car, because it carried an impressive price tag. The dream gradually became something the entire family could talk about together. It was no longer just one person's wish. Each member had their own ideas about what the perfect vehicle should look like. Some preferred a classic and elegant appearance, while others were fascinated by modern technology and advanced features. There were conversations about colors, seating arrangements, interior materials, safety features, and even the small details that most people might never notice. Yet every time the family came close to making the purchase, another responsibility seemed to appear. Important family commitments needed attention. Other priorities came first. Plans changed, circumstances became complicated, and the dream had to be placed on hold once again. At times, it probably felt as though the perfect moment would never arrive. Still, the family continued to keep the dream alive. They didn't forget about the car. Instead, they continued watching the market, learning about new models, and waiting for the right opportunity. Months could pass without any major progress, but the idea remained in the background. What made the dream particularly meaningful was the patience behind it. They could have made a quick decision at any moment, but they wanted the purchase to feel right. They wanted to look back years later and know that they had chosen carefully. The family also understood that a luxury car comes with more than a beautiful exterior. There are maintenance costs, insurance, security considerations, comfort for passengers, and the practical realities of owning such a vehicle. Every detail mattered. So the dream continued to grow slowly. One evening, the conversation about the car became more serious than usual. The family began discussing their favorite models again, looking at photographs and specifications, and imagining what it would be like to finally see their chosen vehicle waiting for them. For the first time in a long while, the dream didn't feel impossibly far away. There was a sense that perhaps the right moment was finally approaching. The family began making plans. They contacted professionals, arranged visits, and started examining their options more closely. Instead of simply imagining the car, they were now taking real steps toward making the dream happen. And with every conversation, every decision, and every small preparation, the dream that had once existed only in their imagination was slowly becoming something tangible. Perhaps the right moment was finally approaching. The family began making plans. They contacted professionals, arranged visits, and started examining their options more closely. Instead of simply imagining the car, they were now taking real steps toward making the dream happen. And with every conversation, every decision, and every small preparation, the dream that had once existed only in their imagination was slowly becoming something tangible. Instead of allowing the pressure to force them into a rushed decision, the family decided to slow down and examine every detail more carefully. They understood that buying a luxury car was not simply about choosing the vehicle with the most impressive appearance or the highest price. They wanted something that would remain meaningful long after the excitement of the purchase had disappeared. The family began by creating a clear list of everything they expected from their dream vehicle. Comfort was one of the most important requirements. They wanted enough space for everyone to travel comfortably, especially during long journeys. The seats needed to provide support, the interior needed to feel peaceful, and there had to be enough room for personal belongings without making the cabin feel crowded. They also paid close attention to the quality of the materials. The family examined different leather options, stitching patterns, wood finishes, metal details, dashboard designs, and other interior features. They ran their hands across the surfaces and looked closely at the craftsmanship. For them, luxury wasn't simply about having expensive materials. It was about how carefully those materials had been put together. Technology was another major consideration. Modern luxury vehicles can include advanced navigation systems, digital displays, driver assistance features, communication systems, entertainment options, and sophisticated climate controls. The family wanted modern technology, but they didn't want unnecessary features that would make the vehicle complicated to operate. They discussed which features would actually make their journeys easier. Privacy was also extremely important. Because of the family's public position, they needed a vehicle that could provide a comfortable level of privacy while traveling. They considered tinted windows, discreet design elements, comfortable rear seating, and other features that could make journeys more peaceful. Security became another major part of the conversation. The family understood that their vehicle needed to be reliable in a variety of situations. They considered safety systems, vehicle construction, braking technology, visibility, and other protective features. Every detail was examined because they didn't want the excitement of owning a luxury car to come at the expense of peace of mind. Then they began comparing different models. Rather than focusing on only one vehicle, they looked at several options. Each model had its own advantages. One offered a more elegant exterior, another had a more spacious interior, and another featured technology that impressed the family. This made the decision even harder. They started taking notes. They compared specifications, examined photographs, watched demonstrations, and asked professionals detailed questions. They wanted to understand not only how each vehicle looked, but also how it would perform over time. The family also considered the practical side of ownership. A beautiful car might look perfect inside a showroom, but the real test would come after months and years of use. They wanted something dependable, comfortable, and easy to maintain. They didn't want a vehicle that would constantly create problems simply because it looked impressive. The discussion about cost was equally important. Even though the family could consider high-end vehicles, they still wanted to feel that they were making a sensible decision. They compared the features they were receiving with the overall price and considered whether the vehicle genuinely offered the quality they expected. Instead of thinking, "How expensive can the car be?" they began asking, "Which car gives us exactly what we need?" That change in perspective helped them narrow down their choices. They eventually reduced the list to a few serious options. Each remaining vehicle was carefully examined. The family returned to their original priorities and began comparing the cars one by one. They discussed which vehicle offered the best combination of elegance, comfort, technology, privacy, safety, and practicality. One family member favored a particular model because of its timeless exterior. Another preferred a different vehicle because of its luxurious rear cabin. Someone else focused on the driving experience and reliability. The conversations sometimes became surprisingly intense. Everyone wanted the final choice to be something the entire family could appreciate. They also thought about the memories they would create with the vehicle. It would not simply be used for official appearances. It could become part of family celebrations, long, distance journeys, quiet evenings, and important moments that would later become cherished memories. That made the decision much more personal. Eventually, the family returned to the showroom for another detailed inspection. This time, they were not simply looking at the vehicle from a distance. They opened every door. They sat in every important seat. They examined the dashboard. They tested the controls. They looked at the storage areas. They checked the lighting. They examined the materials under the showroom lights. They asked questions about delivery times, customization options, maintenance, and available specifications. The family wanted to eliminate every possible doubt before making their decision. After all the delays and difficulties they had already experienced, they didn't want to look back and regret rushing the final step. The atmosphere inside the showroom became increasingly serious. The family stood together once again, discussing their final choices. The salesperson waited patiently nearby while they compared the remaining options. This time, however, there was a noticeable difference. They were no longer simply dreaming about owning a luxury car. They were finally deciding which one would become theirs. After months of waiting, discussions, comparisons, and difficult decisions, the family finally reached the moment they had imagined so many times before. The choice was no longer something they could postpone. They had examined different models, considered every important feature, discussed the opinions of each family member, and carefully thought about what would be best for their future journeys. The final decision was made inside the showroom. The atmosphere suddenly felt different. What had once been a simple visit to look at luxury cars had now become the moment when the family's long-awaited dream was finally becoming real. They stood beside the vehicle they had chosen, looking at its carefully designed exterior and imagining how different life would feel once it was finally part of their family. For a few moments, nobody seemed in a hurry. They wanted to take in the moment. The vehicle stood under the bright showroom lights, its polished body reflecting the surroundings. Every line of its exterior had been designed with precision, from the front grille to the carefully shaped headlights and smooth body panels. The family walked around it slowly, noticing details they had discussed during their earlier visits. They opened the doors again and stepped inside. The interior immediately reminded them why they had chosen this particular vehicle. The seats were carefully finished. The dashboard looked modern and elegant, and the cabin had a calm atmosphere that made it feel completely different from an ordinary car. One family member sat in the rear seat and imagined the long journeys that would soon take place there. Another examined the controls and technology. Someone else looked closely at the interior materials, checking the stitching and small design details they had previously discussed. Everything they had been searching for seemed to be in one place, but before the purchase could be finalized, there were still several important steps. The family reviewed the specifications one final time. They checked the selected color, interior configuration, optional features, technology packages, and other details. They wanted to make certain that the vehicle being ordered was exactly the one they had agreed upon. There was no room for confusion. After such a long search, they wanted every detail to be correct. The paperwork was then prepared. For the family, signing those documents carried an emotional weight that went beyond the purchase itself. Every signature represented another step toward something they had once thought might remain only a dream. They carefully reviewed the agreement before signing. The final price was confirmed. The selected specifications were confirmed. The delivery arrangements were discussed. The family asked about the expected arrival date and what would happen before the vehicle could officially be handed over to them. As the final documents were completed, the excitement inside the showroom grew. They had done it. The car was no longer simply a vehicle they had admired. It was now their vehicle. However, the family still had to wait for the delivery. That waiting period felt completely different from the earlier delays. Before, they had been waiting because circumstances were preventing them from making the purchase. Now, they were waiting because the purchase had already been made. Every passing day brought them closer to the moment when the vehicle would arrive. They began imagining its first appearance. They discussed where it would be parked. They considered the first journey they would take together. They talked about who would sit where and what destination would be chosen for the first drive. Even small conversations about the vehicle became exciting. Family members would look at photographs of the exact model they had selected. They would discuss its features again and remember the showroom visits that had eventually led them to this choice. Meanwhile, preparations were being made for the vehicle's arrival. The family wanted everything to be ready. The appropriate space needed to be prepared. Security arrangements had to be considered. The vehicle needed to be protected from unnecessary attention, and the family wanted its arrival to be handled carefully. Then came the message they had been waiting for. The vehicle was ready. The news immediately changed the atmosphere around the family. After so many months of uncertainty, there was finally a confirmed moment when their dream would become physically present in front of them. The anticipation became almost impossible to hide. On the day of delivery, the family waited for the vehicle to arrive. The minutes seemed longer than usual. Everyone knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for since the beginning of their journey. Then, in the distance, the first sight of the new luxury car appeared. Slowly, it approached. The family watched as the vehicle moved toward them, its exterior shining under the daylight. For a moment, everything became quiet. They had seen photographs of the car countless times. They had sat inside similar models. They had discussed specifications for hours. But seeing their own vehicle arriving for the first time was completely different. The car finally stopped. A representative stepped forward and formally presented the vehicle to the family. The keys were prepared, the final details were confirmed, and the family gathered around their new purchase. One member of the family reached for the keys. That simple gesture carried years of anticipation behind it. They had waited. They had reconsidered. They had faced delays. They had compared countless options. And now the keys were finally in their hands. The doors were opened once again. But this time there was no showroom staff explaining the features. This time, the family was preparing to leave in their own car. They carefully placed their belongings inside, adjusted the seats, checked the controls, and settled into the cabin. The engine started. For the first time, the sound of the vehicle belonged to them. The family looked at one another with smiles, realizing that the long process of choosing, waiting, and preparing had finally reached the moment they had been waiting for. The driver slowly moved the vehicle forward. The showroom began to disappear behind them as the new luxury car entered the road for its first journey with the family. The first journey in the new luxury car felt completely different from any ordinary drive the family had taken before. For months, they had discussed this vehicle, compared different models, waited through delays, and imagined what it would feel like to finally sit inside it. Now, there was no showroom around them, no salesperson explaining the features, and no list of vehicles left to compare. The car was finally theirs, and the first journey had officially begun. As the vehicle slowly moved away from the showroom, the family members looked around the cabin with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The interior that they had previously examined under bright showroom lights now felt completely different. Natural daylight entered through the windows, the seats were adjusted to their preferred positions, and the quiet atmosphere inside the vehicle created a sense of comfort. For the family, this wasn't simply the first drive of a new car. It was the first real experience of something they had waited so long to achieve. The driver carefully guided the vehicle onto the main road. The smooth movement immediately became noticeable. There was very little noise inside the cabin, allowing the family to speak comfortably with one another. The younger members of the family were particularly excited, looking at the technology, the displays, and the small details they had previously only seen during the showroom visit. One of them pointed out a feature on the dashboard. Another began exploring the entertainment system. Someone else adjusted the climate controls and smiled at how quickly the cabin responded. The family laughed together as they discovered features they had spent so much time discussing before the purchase. Outside the windows, the scenery slowly changed. The busy streets around the showroom gave way to quieter roads. Buildings became less crowded, traffic began to thin, and the family finally had an opportunity to relax and enjoy the vehicle without the pressure of making decisions. They had already spent so much time asking whether they had made the right choice. Now they could finally experience the answer for themselves. The ride was smooth and comfortable. Every small detail seemed to confirm why they had chosen this particular vehicle. The seats provided the support they wanted, the cabin remained quiet, and the spacious interior allowed everyone to settle comfortably. The family began talking about where they should take the car for its first proper outing. There were several suggestions. Someone wanted to drive toward the countryside. Another suggested visiting a beautiful location outside the city. Someone else wanted to use the car for a special family dinner. The discussion itself became part of the experience. They realized that the vehicle would eventually become connected to many different memories. It would carry them to celebrations, family gatherings, important events, and quiet moments that had nothing to do with luxury or public attention. For the first time, the family began thinking beyond the purchase. They were thinking about the life that would happen inside the vehicle. As the journey continued, the driver became more comfortable with the car. The steering felt responsive, the suspension absorbed the uneven sections of the road, and the vehicle remained calm even as the speed gradually increased. The family members noticed how different the driving experience felt compared with the vehicles they had used before. There was a sense of control and comfort that made the journey feel effortless. The road ahead opened into a longer stretch, and the family decided to continue rather than immediately return home. They wanted to enjoy the first drive. There was no reason to rush. The vehicle continued smoothly along the road while the family talked about the journey that had brought them there. They remembered their first conversations about buying a luxury car. They remembered the different models they had considered. They remembered the disagreements about colors and interiors. They remembered the moments when they had thought about postponing the purchase again. Those memories made the current moment feel even more meaningful. One family member looked out of the window quietly for a few moments, watching the scenery pass by. There was a noticeable sense of relief on their face. So much uncertainty had surrounded the purchase. Now, all of that uncertainty had been replaced by a simple reality. They were finally driving their dream car. The family eventually stopped at a peaceful location where they could take a short break. Everyone stepped outside and looked back at the vehicle. Seeing it parked in front of them was almost strange. For so long, it had existed as an idea, a photograph, a discussion, or a possibility. Now it was sitting directly in front of them. They walked around the vehicle, noticing how different it looked outside the showroom. Natural light revealed details that had been difficult to appreciate indoors. The exterior appeared elegant without being overly complicated, and the carefully selected color gave it a distinctive appearance. The family took photographs of the moment, not because they needed to prove that they owned a luxury vehicle, but because they wanted to remember the beginning of this new chapter. The first photographs were taken from different angles. One family member stood beside the front of the car. Another leaned against the side while smiling. The younger members gathered around the rear section. For them, the photographs captured more than the vehicle. They captured the journey that had led to it. After spending some time outside, the family returned to the cabin. The doors closed softly, the interior became quiet again, and the driver prepared to continue the journey. This time, everyone seemed more relaxed. The initial excitement had settled into a comfortable happiness. They had already experienced the first few miles, tested the vehicle on different roads, explored many of its features, and discovered how it felt when the entire family traveled together. The conversation shifted toward future plans. They discussed upcoming family events and destinations where the new vehicle could take them. There was talk of long drives, weekend trips, special celebrations, and evenings when they could simply leave the city behind for a few hours. The luxury car was quickly becoming part of their family routine. And as the vehicle continued down the road, the family began to understand that the real experience of owning their dream car had only just begun. And perhaps that is what made this journey so special. The royal family's dream luxury car was never just about owning something beautiful or expensive. It became a reminder of the patience, difficult decisions, and determination that came before it. There were moments when the dream seemed far away. There were delays, disagreements, and times when they wondered if they should simply wait a little longer. But they continued moving forward, one decision at a time. And when they finally drove away in their new car, they weren't just carrying a set of keys. They were carrying years of hopes and memories. Every journey afterward became another reminder of how far they had come. The car became part of family celebrations, quiet drives, important occasions, and simple moments together. Sometimes, the greatest luxury isn't the vehicle itself. It's having the people you love beside you while you travel toward the next chapter of your life. And as the royal family continued their journey, the road ahead was still waiting, with new destinations, new memories, and new dreams yet to be discovered. Their dream car had finally arrived, but their journey was only beginning.